Hi everyone, welcome to our next session. We were just having so much of a chat there, Sharon and I, that we got slightly sidetracked, so sorry about that. I think we're both equally passionate about this area. So Sharon Smith has been involved in public procurement with the Northern Ireland Civil Service since November 2001. She was most recently appointed as Chief Executive of Construction and Procurement Delivery. And that provides a range of services to public bodies. The services include the procurement of supplies, services and construction works, advice on the management of projects, and a range of property and facilities management services. It also supports the work of the Procurement Board, I'm having real difficulty with that word here, which is chaired by the Finance Minister, and it's also assisted the Board in the development of new policy notes, which includes policies on scoring social value and social services and supply chain resilience. So it sounds all quite dry, but actually this is what we're talking about today. This is about making it easier for both people with disabilities to enter the workforce, but also for all of our supply chains, particularly coming from the civil service as one of our biggest employers in Northern Ireland, and equally globally, people will be in a similar position with their government departments. So we're delighted to have Sharon here today. I'm really very much looking forward to this session. Sharon.
Thank you all very much and good afternoon. I know I'm competing with lunch, so I even more give you thanks that you're all here and you're going to listen. And also thanks to the organisers of the Harkin Summit for inviting me to speak today about incorporating social value into public procurement. Not an easy word to say, Tara, I will agree, in Northern Ireland. So I'm the Chief Executive of Construction and Procurement Delivery within the Department of Finance. I've been in this role since July 2021. And before that, I was the head of an operational delivery procurement organisation for over 20 years. Throughout my career, I have been an advocate for the delivery of better social outcomes through public procurement, and I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about some of my experiences. And in the words of Senator Harkin this morning, I don't know how many of you were at his presentation, but I'm going to check. I'm all fired up and... Thanks very much. I see you're still awake. Okay, so let's briefly just talk about the origins of Northern Ireland public procurement. I promise you this will be quick. Public procurement policy was established in May 2002. That's 20 years ago. I know I'm getting really old and I was there when it started. And it was brought in by the Northern Ireland Executive. The Executive agreed at that time that legislation was not required and that departments and their sponsored bodies would comply with policy by administrative means. And that means that we don't set legislation in Northern Ireland. What we do is develop policy, and then it's agreed, and then that becomes enforceable. A procurement board was established at that time, and it consisted of all the permanent secretaries of the department. It had 2 external board members. It had the Treasury Officer of Accounts and a representative from the Strategic Investment Board. So that was the board who was really overseeing public procurement policy at that time. The board at that stage was chaired by the Finance Minister, and they collectively were responsible for the development, dissemination and coordination of public procurement policy. And at that time, best value for money was also defined. And here's where we start to see the shift between what was policy and where we are now today. So in 2002, best value for money was defined as the optimum combination of whole life cost and quality or fitness for purpose to meet the customer's requirements. And you'll see on the slide that the 2011 definition changed that to the most economic combination of cost, quality and sustainability to meet customers' requirements. So it's significant that from 2011, the Executive has required sustainability, that's social, environmental and economic considerations to be incorporated into public procurement spend. A busy slide here, and that's because there was a huge amount of work that happened between 2002 and 2020. Around 50 procurement guidance notes, or as they're called, PGNs, were published. These were approved by the Procurement Board and published on the website. They were developed to deal with a range of procurement matters, including resolving specific issues like prompt payment to suppliers, promoting best practice, that's the use of the NEC or construction form of contract, reducing barriers for small and medium enterprises, managing risks driven by global market conditions, and the most recent of those were the 2020 guidance notes on supplier relief due to COVID, and then highlighting specific aspects of procurement legislation like abnormally low tenders or evaluation of tenders. A very busy slide coming up next. This is what the page looked like in 2018, and this was the first page of guidance notes, a huge amount of guidance. One of the main criticisms in 2020 was that between all of the guidance that existed, departments didn't know what was mandated, what was policy, or what was simply best practice. And as you can see from that page, a huge amount of information for departments and people bidding into government to consider. So over the years, there has been a number of guidance notes that specifically incorporated social value. And these were, in 2008, the Equality of Opportunity and Sustainable Development in Public Procurement. In 2013, the Integrating Social Considerations into Government Contracts. And then in 2018, Human Rights in Public Procurement. Just looking on to the next slide. Is it up there? Yeah. So in 2013, the guidance on integrating social considerations into contracts introduced the bi-social model. The model was developed by the Strategic Investment Board and CPD, who I work for, in consultation with departments, procurement organisations and industry representatives. It required departments to include a contractual requirement for a quantifiable number of targeted recruitment and training opportunities for new entrant trainees. It advised that social needs and objectives could be framed in terms of providing employment and training opportunities for people that are disadvantaged in the labour market. So the delivery of social value, the social value unit was established by the Strategic Investment Board in 2014 with a mandate from the Northern Ireland Executive to help deliver social value through central and local government. Here's a short video from 2019 outlining the impact of social clauses, and the introduction is given by the then Head of the Civil Service, David Sterling.
Each year in Northern Ireland, we invest some £2.7 billion in our public infrastructure, building schools, roads and hospitals. Bi-social is a smart intervention that is helping us get the best possible value out of that investment. It's designed to help people who have become distanced from the labour market and who are struggling to find employment. Bi-social is mandatory. All procurements over a certain value, whether that be construction, services or ICT, are required to set aside a certain number of ring-fenced training and employment opportunities for people. By promoting a diversity and equality and inclusion, Bi-social is improving communities and changing lives. Already across Northern Ireland, some 340 people have benefited from Bi-social, and here are some of their stories.
I was at home with 4 young children. My youngest was approaching nursery age, and I attended a jobs fair for one of the projects that had a bi-social clause in. It had a long-term unemployed category, so I had been out of work for more than 6 months.
I'm involved in designing the services that go into buildings. My main project is the Ulster Hospital, and I work with 2 other CAD coordinators. Before this, I was actually working in the Ulster Hospital. I was working in the cafe. Unfortunately, that had to end due to health problems. I got this job through the bi-social clause, and it's helped me a lot in getting a sustainable job that I hope to continue in the future.
I drive around from the depot to different customer clients just to collect their mail, big parcels and letters and stuff, and it'll be brought back down to Belfast where it can be processed and sorted out. I'm much more happier now, I'm much more settled than I have been the past few years. I have been struggling with the terms of employment because of my disability. It wasn't easy for me to tie down a long-term job. I haven't moved about different jobs off and on employment and unemployment, but this one has given me a positive long-term future.
You've been out of the workplace, you've no contacts, you've no confidence, you're not going to be cold calling people. Equally, nobody's going to knock on the door and give you a job. You have to put yourself out there. And from an employer's perspective, when you don't have a reference and you don't have any contacts, they've no evidence that you're going to be good at your job or that you're going to be worth taking a chance on. So the bisocial allows, I would always say it's like a long interview, gives the employer and the employee a chance to get to know each other and see if it works.
If I wasn't in this job, I think I would probably still be at home, sitting on benefits and not contributing to society. I really enjoy my work, actually. I think it's really fun when you're drawing a project, and there is no better feeling than finishing drawings and then issuing them. I go on site quite often, at least once a week at this point, to see what pipes have been installed and what pipes haven't, and it's very satisfying to see pipes installed that you've drawn yourself.
My social has helped by it's given me a long-term future, given me a job stability, and I have really enjoyed working here. It's given me a better long-term future.
Bisocial gives people the opportunity to improve their lives and to participate fully in society. It's a stepping stone for both employers and employees.
I think the bisocial clause is a fantastic opportunity, because I know for a fact last year I never would have been in this kind of job without it. Because normally people go to train for years for this, but I actually got an opportunity to go in and learn on the job with no training at all, and it's helped me so much. I never would have thought that I would have worked in construction, and I think it would be brilliant as well for other people to get the opportunity to work somewhere that they never would have thought they would have been.
It's give people who have disabilities a chance to give them a good positive state of mind for them to enjoy, give them a good positive outlook for the future. Don't judge it a book by its cover.
Okay, that's just some case studies of the work of the bisocial, and that is about including social clauses into contracts where contractors are required to employ people either who are long-term unemployed or people with disabilities, and there's just some of the case studies from people who have actually lived through that experience. I just want to focus a bit on one of the contracts shown in the video. The Northern Ireland Civil Service Postal Contract was awarded in 2016 to Whistle. The Social Value Unit and CPD agreed social value requirements which were included in the contract specification. This meant that the contractor had to employ people who were either long-term unemployment, leave in education, or those with disabilities. One of the people to benefit from the clause completed a Level 2 qualification in warehousing and then enrolled himself on the Job Match programme with Disability Action. Shortly thereafter, an opportunity came through the bisocial clause in the Collaborative Postal Contract, and with the support of Disability Action and Disability Employment Service, which is part of the Department for Communities, he gained a permanent post in Whistle in November 2016. Disability Action commented on their experience that utilising the supported employment model, Disability Action's job match team worked with Whistle to gain a clear understanding of their business needs and to ascertain the skills they require from their employees. It was clear from an early stage that the candidate had an excellent range of skills and a high level of motivation for work. Disability Action supported him throughout the recruitment process with Whistle, negotiating a short work trial and advocating from the pre-employment stage right through to job start. And he and his manager continue to be supported by Job Match to ensure his continued success and the development of his career. So it's with that additional support from organisations like Disability Action that help people not only gain employment but to stay in employment. Social clauses were originally brought into construction contracts. It seemed to be a very logical move from apprentices into social clauses to get people with disabilities or who were harder to reach in the workforce into contracts through construction. It was then developed into service contracts, and more recently it has been developed into ICT contracts. One of a good example of social clauses within an IT contract is the Department for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. And it's a contract for business intelligence and data analytics, which was awarded to Deloitte in May 2019. As part of the contract, Deloitte are required to deliver work placement opportunities for people who are considered to be disadvantaged in the labour market. Deloitte worked in partnership with the Now Group to develop 4 work placement opportunities over a 4-week period. The Now Group is a social enterprise based in Northern Ireland, supporting people with learning disabilities and autism into jobs with a future. The Now Group's employment and training team worked with Deloitte to identify suitable participants and supported them throughout their placements on the Department for Agriculture's contracts. During the planning stage, Deloitte spoke to the participants to again gain an understanding of the types of skills and experiences they wanted to gain from the opportunity and used this to develop a bespoke training programme. Each participant was assigned a buddy from Deloitte team and had opportunities to shadow the department's staff. Participants undertook a combination of technical computer training and soft skills, focusing on personal skills, presentation skills, CV writing and teamwork. At the end of the placement, participants were given the opportunity to take part in mock interviews held by Deloitte and the department. To show the impact of the work, I've included some feedback from the participants for this particular contract. And you'll see just by the 2 quotes there that the participants gained really useful experience to help them with their future employment opportunities. Before coming to this session, I was involved in the mentoring session, which has taken place on the 3rd floor. And there were people there, I spoke to 2 young people, one age 18 and one age 20, who don't really have the confidence to get that through those interview type scenarios. Even to get themselves to interview will be a particular challenge for them. So it is for employers to make sure that those mock interviews are available for people who find it more difficult to approach employers through the normal routes. And I'm sure you've heard this morning about the guaranteed interview scheme that the civil service is operating. And that's just understanding that those skills that we need to do the work that we are here to do may be difficult to get to because we have barriers in the way. So it's about breaking down those barriers. We all know the old saying, if you treasure it, measure it. And it is on that principle that the Social Value Unit developed a bespoke monitoring system in 2017 to capture the outcomes achieved by each contract that includes social value clauses. Up to the end of 2021, social value has been included in more than 300 contracts across the construction, services and ICT sectors. More than 900 weeks of work experience have been delivered for people who are disadvantaged in the labour market, and over 2,400 people who were on long-term unemployed or had no sustainable work experience have been able to access a job opportunity. Of these new entrant trainees, 23% were female, 70% were under the age of 25, and 17% live in a neighbourhood renewal area based on their postcode data. And you can see even from the short video that I played with David Sterling, where he was talking about 300 people. So since 2019 to 2021, there has been a significant increase in the number of people gaining opportunities to work or the experience to work through government contracts in Northern Ireland. A minimum of 98% of bisocial participants have either remained in employment with the contractor, found alternative employment elsewhere, or return to education or training. So, whilst the incorporation of social clauses into contracts has delivered significant benefits to new entrant employees and their employers, the Executive has wanted to go further to embed social value into its public procurement. Wanting to make a significant difference, the Finance Minister established a new procurement board in December 2020. The Minister replaced permanent secretaries with senior procurement practitioners from a number of centres of procurement expertise and appointed a number of industry bodies and representatives from the voluntary, community and social economy sectors. So this created a real opportunity for policy to be developed with input from other sectors. In addition to restructuring the board, the Minister also changed the approach to the approval process to ensure consistency and compliance in the application of policy. As such, procurement policy must now be approved by the Executive before it's published on the DOF website in the form of procurement policy notes. This is a significant change because whilst not making our legislation, this is as close as you will get to legislation if it's executive policy, because that's a really, really strong mandate. Another important step was to move, if you can remember that busy slide of the 2018 PGNs over 50, there's a step from guidance notes to policy notes. And this again has helped with reducing the policy notes that we have on our website. At a recent visit to the Northern Ireland Business and Human Rights Forum, the Finance Minister said, "The ultimate measure of commercial success in public procurement and public sector is about improving people's social and economic well-being or rights, and government policy should be directed towards these broader societal goals." He said, "Within my own department, I've tried to apply that principle to procurement policy." With that in mind, the Minister, we produced a forward work programme for procurement policy in April 2021, and the priorities were agreed with industry, procurement practitioners, but first and foremost, as a priority, the Minister wanted to implement procurement policy to drive those broader societal alongside cost and quality. Since then, 5 procurement policies have been agreed by the Executive and now are on our website. And what we have been doing is taking away all of those guidance notes to reduce the ambiguity and inconsistency. The timeline for those policies was, number 1, scoring social value. It was brought in July 2021, but significantly, it's not effective or wasn't effective until the 1st of June this year. And there is a reason for that, and we'll go into that in a later slide. The Executive then approved 4 further policies, and you'll note number 2 was social and other specific services. Again, I'll go into more detail as we go through the slides. Supply chain resilience, really important. COVID has taught us that long supply chains bring with it significant risk. So how do we shorten our supply chains? How do we increase capacity and capability for critical services here on the island of Ireland? Then procurement control limits, that's just telling contracting authorities what they have to do when they get to certain financial limits. And then human rights, which is really just compounding the human rights legislation and telling contracting authorities how to do it through public procurement. The new policies are simpler to navigate and genuinely reflect the Executive's priorities and obligations on their public procurement. As I mentioned, the 2 most significant and the most relevant for today are scoring social value and the procurement of social and other specific services. The policy on scoring social value is that it mandates the scoring of social value, and it indicates clearly the importance the Executive attaches to delivering social value through its spend. The policy on scoring social value outlines the importance of considering it at the earliest possible stage to ensure the procurement strategy maximises the social benefits delivered through public contracts. The guidance goes into a huge amount of detail about when you should look at it, when you're going out to pre-market engagement, how you should engage with the communities affected by the spend, how the specification should incorporate ethical and environmental impacts, and most importantly, how the social value should be scored. The policy, as I said, outlines the importance of pre-market engagement to help identify opportunities and maximise social outcomes for each competition, and to identify different delivery models to meet the contract objectives and highlight any potential barriers to delivery. What you'll see there is the themes that are covered under the social value policy. So from the 1st of June 2022, it's mandated that 10% of the overall scoring is attributed to one of the themes that you see in front of you, whether employment, training and skills, ethical and resilient supply chains, equal opportunities and employment practices, climate change and well-being. Under the employment, training and skills themes, this includes the creation of employment opportunities, particularly for those who face barriers to employment, and/or who are located in deprived areas. It also includes social value indicators on increasing the representation of disabled people in the contractor's workforce and supporting people with disabilities to deliver and develop new skills and recognise qualifications. Within the wellbeing theme, contractors can be asked to promote equality, diversity and inclusion, and to support the health and wellbeing, including physical and mental health of their workers. Contracting authorities from the 1st of June have been asked to look at the themes and to prioritise which of the social value indicators best meets their objectives. So, as I said, from the 1st of June 2022, tenders must include a minimum of 10% scoring for the award criteria. Within the policy, our Minister was very keen to have this reviewed with the potential to increase that percentage to 20% in June 2023. And this will apply to all contracts over a certain threshold. So the key differences between the previous bisocial model is that scoring social value policy has, one, broadened the themes to incorporate more social value initiatives and environmental initiatives. And also, rather than being delivered through contract clauses solely, suppliers are now scored on how they will do this, how they will engage with stakeholders, how they will develop, plan, implement and monitor social value. The Cabinet Office implemented a similar policy in December 2020 by introducing again a minimum weighting for social value of 10%. Their policy note issued by the Cabinet Office stated that the 10% was specifically chosen to ensure that social value carries a heavy enough score to be a differentiating factor in the bid evaluation. So the question, should it make a difference? The answer, yes, that's why it's there. Contractors are required to demonstrate how they will deliver social value, and the key is they will be monitored as part of the contract in how they do it. Whilst the policy on scoring social value, as I mentioned, was introduced and published in July 2021, it was agreed that because of the significance of the policy and the shift, it wouldn't become effective until the 1st of June 2022. The lead-in time was allowed to ensure that training was developed for procurement organisations, departments and suppliers, and that social value could be incorporated into business cases. The training was developed by Strategic Investment Board and is available on the Social Value website. And I've got a link to the website at the very end of the presentation. So here is a short video by the head of the Civil Service, and I hope it's going to come up. Yes. There we go.
As head of the Northern Ireland Civil Service, I'm invested in transforming our services. And for that reason, I'm delighted the procurement policy note, scoring social value, was approved by the Executive. We, the Northern Ireland Government, as well as being the largest employer in Northern Ireland, invest close to $3 billion each year in public sector contracts, and this enables us to effect change. To maximise this investment, from the 1st of June 2022, the Northern Ireland Executive has committed to mandatory scoring of social value within public procurement contracts, in services and in works. Put simply, scoring social value introduces a new criterion asking suppliers to demonstrate how the award of that contract will benefit their community, the environment or society at large. The training you're about to complete will explain more about the concept of social value, how social value can be scored, evaluated and effectively contract managed. This valuable policy will help us to harness the full potential of our spending. In doing so, we can change the course of people's lives and benefit communities right across Northern Ireland.
So that was just a short intro to the e-learning that's available on the Social Value website for contractors, for departments and for procurement organisations. Now, it will take a number of years to monitor the impact of the new policy. However, the Department of Finance started to look for opportunities to introduce scoring social values in some of its larger contracts as the Executive's policy intent was becoming clear. One of those contracts was the Northern Ireland Civil Service Agency Workers Contracts 2020. The agency workers contract included social value as an award criterion in the tender process, and a question on social value was introduced in the invitation to tender and was allocated 5% of the total score. The social value included was linked to the Northern Ireland People Strategies Priority Action, that is an inclusive Northern Ireland civil service in which diversity is truly valued, a great place to work. The Northern Ireland Civil Service People Strategy also calls for targeted action to drive balance and inclusion. So it's with that strategic driver that we put the award criteria into the contract. Sorry about the busyness of this slide, but there's a lot of information. So the social value requirements meant that the contractor is required to ring-fence employment opportunities on the contract for key priority groups: people with disabilities, people from a care background, and people from a minority ethnic background. The contract also included the following social value requirements: that's targeted recruitment and training for people distanced from the labour market, business and education support, support for the voluntary community social enterprise sector, human rights, environmental considerations, and also the use of social enterprises in the supply chain. So you can see, even back in that contract went out to tender probably in early 2019, that the Department of Finance is looking for any opportunities it can to make sure that we make as many social value impacts through the contracts that we have. And this was an agency worker contract, and if you think about that, that means us bringing temporary staff into the civil service who are either distanced from the labour market or who have disabilities. And that allows them to gain that inside knowledge in the civil service. So when opportunities come up to work in the civil service, that means they do have a head start. That means they understand how the process works, and that's really important. So Premier People was awarded the contract, or a number of lots under the contract, and have worked with the Northern Ireland Union of Supported Employment to proactively encourage people with a disability to apply for temporary roles within the Northern Ireland Civil Service. Premier and the Union of Supported Employment hosted an information session to over 30 organisations who support people with disabilities in 2021. Premier People said, "We are extremely proud to demonstrate our ability to deliver social value to the Northern Ireland Civil Service. We work with Northern Ireland Civil Service to promote equal opportunities and a fair and inclusive jobs market where every individual can participate and achieve their full potential." The Union of Supported Employment said, "We've been working with the team at Premier in the previous contract and in this new contract. They have had many success stories of people with disabilities getting temporary posts in the Northern Ireland Civil Service. We have developed a great partnership with Premier People, which has been a win-win situation for all parties. People with disabilities getting into employment, Northern Ireland Civil Service getting excellent staff, and Premier People fulfilling their social value contractual commitments. We want to share this experience with other contractors and help them to meet their social value commitments." So the policy on procurement, so that was the policy on scoring social value. The second policy to be introduced into Northern Ireland in 2021 was the procurement of social and other specific services, a really key policy that drives how our departments buy goods and services that are delivered into the community, whether it's training, whether it's counselling, whether it's health and social care. So this is about, the policy is about getting maximum flexibility to organisations who are procuring these types of services, and it is lifting some of the restrictions that were previously on them through other policies. So the policy recognises organisations, the policy requires organisations to engage with service providers and relevant communities for community-based services to ascertain, firstly, is grant funding the best way to do this, rather than procurement? So it's actually making them think about what they're trying to deliver and what is the best mechanism to get that. If it is deemed that procurement is the only viable route, then the policy outlines what flexibilities must be included in the procurements. One of the flexibilities is within the award criteria, which can be weighted towards the delivery of social outcomes, and it can include the need to ensure quality, accessibility, a comprehensiveness of the services, the specific needs of different categories of users, including disadvantaged and vulnerable groups, the involvement and empowerment of users of the service, and innovation. There is a significant focus as well within the policy on reserving contracts, recognising that the voluntary community and social enterprises are generally the key providers in these specific services. Now, reserving contracts is probably a bit of a technical term, but what it means is that when you go out to tender, you can actually restrict the type of organisations that are bidding for that work. So one of the restrictions can be that the organisation's goal is in the pursuit of public service mission linked to the delivery of the contract. That's either social, health, community or educational services, and that their profits are reinvested with a view to achieving the organisation's objectives. So again, very much aligned to the social enterprise model. Contracts can also be reserved for organisations where 30% of their employees are either disabled or have disabilities or are from a disadvantaged background. There's no restriction on the types of contracts that can be reserved under this provision. And so long as the organisation has 30% employees who are disabilities or have disabilities or are disadvantaged, you could, in effect, restrict the contract to those organisations only. In addition, what the policy points out is the maximum discretion available for departments using procurement to buy social and other specific services, so community services. And the threshold for buying these services is quite high. It's just over £650,000. The threshold for buying normal services is around £122,000. So you can see, even within our current legislation, which is due to change, there is a huge amount of flexibility permitted for these types of services, recognising, one, the type of organisations who are delivering them, and two, the needs of the users that are receiving the services. And this flexibility of the process, so if you decide procurement's my only option, I've looked at what the market is, I've looked at the capability of the organisations, then what you can do is also have flexibilities below the threshold to select organisations to tender whose purpose is in the pursuit of the service. So you can decide what organisations exist out there and have a ring-fence contract for those organisations if it's below 663,000. You can introduce measures to reduce barriers for SMEs or SEs or social enterprises or voluntary and community organisations. So you could, in effect, carry out your competition, putting the presentations first. You could bring organisations and say, tell us about your organisation, what do you deliver, and then try and match that to what you're trying to buy, and then go into something that looks more like a paper tender exercise. But what you will have done then is to look at the capabilities of those organisations, discuss with them the award criteria for that contract, and decide how you're going to achieve your best outcomes through that dialogue. So it doesn't have to be a formal, put the tender out, see what comes back, jot up the scores and award it to the highest ranked tender. It can be a combination of a lot of things, as long as it's transparent, as long as there's a documented trail, and as long as you can justify the actions that you take. You know, that's all within the flexibilities for those types of contracts. So this maximum flexibility, and we haven't maximised this in Northern Ireland because this currently exists in our regulations. There is a bit of a fear factor with this. There's a leap of faith to be had. But this flexibility allows departments to create markets solely for third sector bodies or organisations whose primary focus is social value. The key policy intent behind this policy note is that the procurement of these services are treated differently from the procurement of other types of services, and that more focus is placed on the service provider who is best placed to deliver them and the needs of the user of the service. For example, organisations who provide a supported environment for a specific type of workers, or whose main aim is to support the social and professional integration or reintegration of disadvantaged workers. Again, a very busy slide, but a lot to say. Very, very few contracting authorities across the UK, and I'll even go as far to say as across Europe, because I did some research on this. And when you reserve a contract that's over as it was the EU threshold for us, which is 663, you have to put that in your, as they call it, the journal notice. And I researched all journal notices to find how many contracts were reserved. And people were either not putting in the correct provision, or they were just not reserving contracts. We did a survey in Northern Ireland in 2021 of all our centres of procurement expertise. So that's NI Water, TransLink, Health Service, Education, Housing Executive, and our own centres of procurement expertise and Department of Finance. And only 2 contracts had been reserved. That was one that Department of Finance had did for shredding services, and one in health services for bottled water. So out of all of our centres of procurement expertise, only 2 reserved contracts. Now, that is not to say that social enterprises are not up tendering for and winning government contracts. When I was head of the procurement operational delivery within the Department of Finance, I worked closely with Social Enterprise NI to link government contracts to the capacity and capability of the local social economy. One of these contracts that I worked on was the Northern Ireland Civil Service catering contract. And by reaching out to Social Enterprise NI, it attracted interest from particular social enterprises that we hadn't worked with before. So what I did was set up a workshop with one of the catering sites, and I invited the social enterprises to come and discuss with us how we were thinking of shaping the contract. We were going to divide it into lots, but what size of lots would allow them to bid for the contract? Because if you divide your contract up into lots that are too big, it presents too much of a risk for the social enterprise and they won't bid. So we worked closely with the social enterprises in what the best split of the contract would be. I discussed the award criteria, and I discussed really practical things like the insurance requirements. Does your organisation carry this level of insurance? And if not, what is the level of insurance you carry? And then looked at what our needs were and said, does that level of insurance actually cover our risks? And when you talk to the organisations, and this is the benefit of doing this type of pre-market engagement, you will find out that there's gives and takes with both parties. So feedback from the social enterprises was used to inform the strategy. Now, going back to Senator Harkin, I don't know how many, well, a few people were, because they give me the all fired up. Going back to Senator Harkin's opening presentation, and he said, if you clear the ramp for people with extra needs, you will clear it for everybody. So if you talk to people and try and find out what the leveller is for them, you generally find out that you help others along the way as well. So as a result, a small organisation, a small social enterprise, won the contract for the catering for the headquarters of the Department of Health. That's Castle Buildings in the Stormont Estate, for those who know. And this organisation was Orchardville, and I don't know if Joan is in the audience. Maybe give me a wave. Yes, is she here? Yes, she's at the back there. Thanks, Joan. So I strongly believe that Orchardville wouldn't have come forward to bid for this contract had we not done that level of engaging. Because social enterprises sometimes think it's too big for us, it's too much risk. They don't really know how we operate. They really don't care how we operate. But by engaging with organisations with a social purpose, those barriers can be broken down for both parties. Joan's here, and I talked to Joan before the session and asked her, how did winning this government contract help this social enterprise? And she did say that it has helped to create a really strong partnership between Orchardville and the government and Department of Finance and the Department of Health. And whilst Joan recognised the word partnership can be used quite loosely, she actually said this is a genuine partnership that she has experienced. And working alongside the departments has helped them to grow in confidence and also to win other contracts. And that's what it's all about. The question then is if social enterprises can win contracts alongside private sector organisations, because a lot of private sector organisations bid for the work as well, why bother reserving them? Why bother restricting your market down to a small number of suppliers? My answer to that is I believe that by reserving contracts, we will increase the number of persons with disabilities to be employed by private sector organisations. If to win certain contracts, the organisation has to have 30% of the workforce made up from people either with disabilities or from disadvantaged backgrounds, then private sector organisations will either start to consider the diversity and inclusion of their own organisation, or we'll start to partner up with organisations who have already met this objective. So since the survey in 2011, the Department of Finance has awarded 2 further reserved contracts. On both occasions, we have received legal challenges. So we have received writs to stop us awarding these contracts from private sector organisations. And the questions were, why did you reserve it? You know, you shouldn't have reserved it. Give us the evaluation criteria, the award criteria, and the scores for the winning tenderer. Both of those challenges have been withdrawn, but it took us 6 months. So it was a lag of 6 months between awarding a contract to social enterprise and awarding it because we were legally challenged. And I'm not against legal challenges, but I want to make sure that those challenges are for substantive reasons, that we are awarding a contract that breaches something. You know, as you will see, the legal challenges were withdrawn. It is a culture change in Northern Ireland for us to change our strategy. It will not deter the Department of Finance from reserving more contracts. We will probably learn lessons that we should do more market engagement with the private sector organisations to inform them further in advance that we're going to reserve it, so they can then start to make those partnerships. But it certainly hasn't deterred our purpose. So the 2 contracts that we've now been able to award have been awarded to UCEL, and I think UCEL is represented here today as well. UCEL is Northern Ireland's largest supporter of people with disabilities or health conditions, and they get them into employment, and they operate a social enterprise business model. UCEL exists solely to help people with disabilities and health-related conditions move into and sustain employment. They support and train over 1,200 people with disabilities or health conditions across Northern Ireland. Winning the government contract helps UCEL continue to deliver social impacts to the benefit of our society. And I'm coming to a close now, you'll be glad, particularly if you hadn't had anything to eat. Whilst we have delivered a significant amount through social clauses and incorporating social value into procurement, there is still a long way to go. The new policies are in their infancy, and only time will tell how effective they will be to truly embed and deliver social value through public procurement. I do believe that they are a valuable step in the right direction, and if you want to determine in another way, you could say that I'm all fired up and thanks very much.
Lots of interesting detail there. We're going to take another pause, allow transition in and out of the room, and we'll start again in about 5 minutes. Thanks.